Hi, I'm Lori.
And I'm Kevin, and this is No Longer Ashamed.
We are survivors of childhood sexual abuse.
And we're here to share with you that if you're a survivor, you don't have to be alone.
Our logo is a salamander, and the reason is a fire salamander can survive a fire, and you have survived a fire.
We want to help you with your journey to healing and hope.
We are all survivors together, and we walk this journey together, and you are not alone.
By telling our stories, we are hoping that you will have the courage to share your stories as well and find your voice.
Because stories are so important, and for so long I know that I wouldn't tell my story, but when I finally shared my story, that's when I got my freedom.
And this is our journey and your journey to healing and hope. So come with us. We did this really cool thing in Bible study for the teenage kids. We do grapple, and it's junior high, and now some of the kids stuck around, so it's junior high and high school. And last week our lesson was about identity, and of course we talked about what it means to be, have an identity in Christ. But the questions kind of leading up to it were really interesting, and I actually turned it around because I wanted to find out another perspective. So one of the things I asked the kids is, how do you define people? What tells you about a person that tells you about their identity? And ask them, what are the things that you notice that might tell you something about them, that might define them? And, they came up with all these different things. And I think, the first couple kids answered the most easy ones, so the things that come right to their head. And then the next kids had to think about it because they didn't want to say the same thing. But it made me think how we talk about as a survivor, we don't define ourselves by that, but it does represent part of our identity, and it does actually define part of us. And I was thinking about this week, for one thing, that exercise of having the kids talk about what things tell them about someone. It was also for the kids to realize we don't always realize what people see in us and how that identifies us to them, and how that's different from what we think is our identity, but we're being defined by something that we're not even realizing. I mean, some of the kids talked about the clothes they wore. Some of them said who they hang out with. Some of them said how they treat people, and all these different ways that you define someone. But we're not aware necessarily of how people are defining us. But I think it's not always matching up how we define ourselves. And I think that made me realize that, because there are so many ways that kids define someone, and a lot of them are ways I would never have thought of as being part of my identity. So, but it also tied into this week we've had people working on our bathroom. So we've had all these people, these men in our house. And I realized I was affected by that in a way I wasn't really prepared for. And that's because I feel vulnerable and intimidated by men, especially men I don't know. And to have them in my house and working in my house affected me in a way that I basically stayed away from them and just let them do their thing and didn't really interact with them. And I know that's true for me. And part of it was because Charnel, on the first day they were here, they saw my recording equipment in the bedroom, because that's where the bathroom was that they were working on. And so she told them all about the podcast. So she's telling these men I've never met who are working in my house, and I think this is before I even saw them the first time. I'm not sure. Anyway, and so she told them all about the podcast and how I'm a survivor and I'm doing this. And so I know they know I'm a survivor. And so that affected how I interacted with them and how I felt about them being there. I was vulnerable. I felt like, and this is something I know that affects me, is I felt like I was lesser than them, a lesser man, because I was a survivor. And I know that's the way I felt most of my life, but the way it affects me is I'm kind of intimidated at first until I meet them and talk to them and have some connection. And then I don't feel that way. And that's what's changed after all this, therapy and working on my issues, is I still have that feeling of being lesser, of being, not an equal man until I have some connection with them. And then I don't feel that way. I feel connected. I don't feel lesser. I feel on level with them. And that is how being a survivor has affected my identity. So it was a really cool lesson for the kids, but was also really instructive for me.
At what point did you like recognize that you were feeling something? Like, did you come home and they were here? Or like, when did you recognize, oh, I'm feeling inadequate and I'm going to avoid them?
I didn't recognize it until I didn't feel it anymore, until I connected with them, until I talked to them. And one of the guys, the reason that she told him, well, one of the guys wanted some of the cards for the podcast because he knew some women that were survivors and he wanted to give them the information. Well, today, which was the last day, up until today, I've been pretty much avoiding them, just steering clear, hiding out downstairs, reading, being on my laptop, doing stuff, Facebook news. Well, today, after we kind of went through, they were done, we walked through it, and then as they were leaving, the one guy says, "Oh, hey, I listened to your podcast." And he said, "Good job. You're doing a really good thing." And I was like, holy cow. And he's like, "Yeah, I binge listened to like 5 episodes." And I was just blown away. And then he said, he talked about these women that he knew that were abused by their stepfather and that he gave them my cards. And they've only been here 3 days. So he binged 5 episodes in just a couple days. And I was like, thank you. And he's like, yeah, you guys are doing a great thing. He's like, and I was just, wow. And then, of course, I felt a connection and I didn't feel that lesser than. But I know that's often the way I feel. Like at work, when new men come to work on the job or something, I always feel like this intimidation until I get to know them. But I think what it is isn't not just I get to know them, but they get to know me and they know I'm not a lesser man.
Because you think they'll think that.
Yeah, but it was especially more so because these men knew, these guys that were working here, because they knew I was a survivor. So I felt it is funny, but I know I don't define myself, but I'm affected by it.
I think that's really interesting because, again, it's that self-talk.
It is.
That we don't even know is happening.
Yeah.
That, you've come in and you've decided a story about this and then it becomes your truth when it wasn't actually the truth. And I know that I do that. I think people might think things. And then I realized that wasn't even a thought on their mind, but I'm so sure. And it's almost like sometimes when you do something, like if you have a guilty conscience, you think people know, you know what I mean? They know that I did that. They know that
I know that I've done
didn't put my
thing.
cart away. People know. And so that is really interesting. And I wonder,
I think it's really important to realize that what we consider identity and how we define our identity isn't always necessarily what other people recognize it as our identity or define us. And we're defined by different things than we realize.
I often have my clients, I'll ask them to reach out to 5 people. Now they can do it on Facebook, but in the old days, I'd ask them to call or email 5 of their friends and ask them for 3 words that describe them. And every time, first of all, they didn't want to do it, mostly. Second of all, when they did it, they were absolutely blown away because what people said about them, all amazing, kind, wonderful things, were not the things they thought about themselves. They thought of themselves as a failure or all these things. And then that becomes our identity. What we think we are. And I was listening to a Bible study, and I think the question was, who does God say we are?
Yeah.
And the way we know who God or what God says we are is in the Bible. He says he created us. He knew us before we were born. We were made in his image. If we even take those basic things that God planned us and that he knows us and that in Zephaniah, it says he sings over us and that he loves us. If we even begin to believe those things.
Yeah.
And
rather than the image we have in our mind of what God
He
thinks
must be
of
mad
us.
at me. He must be disappointed, almost like a boss. Oh no, he's going to be mad
Uh-huh.
because I messed that up. And I have a family member that's just come out of drugs. He's in a transitioning out process with a clinic. And I hadn't seen him in many years and went to their home because we've had a family tragedy this week. And we couldn't get him to come out and talk to us. And what I recognized is I eventually got to give him a ride to his clinic, and I recognized he had so much shame.
Mm-hmm.
And he thought that we all thought he was a loser.
Mm-hmm. Because
And
of what he had to do.
yeah, and if you know me, I don't think anybody's a loser, let alone a family member. And it took a while to just really love on him and for him to go, oh, wait a minute. Because he's got this identity now of I'm somebody that ruined the family. I did bad things. Drug addicts do. They do bad things when they're on
Mm-hmm.
drugs.
Yeah.
The
Well,
best
and when they
people in the
need
world.
drugs,
Yeah.
not just when they're on drugs, but when they need.
When they need them. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it was just interesting because he's created this identity of who he is now. Now he's, off drugs, but he's whatever it is, and so much shame. And it was just interesting to work really hard to try to be loving and say good words and somehow make him realize that he's forgiven, he's loved.
Yeah.
And I believe that's why we need community. He hasn't at this point chosen to go to any kind of counseling or support groups or anything like that. And that's his choice. But I think when we find people that can A, hear our story, and B, when we find a community and people go, oh yeah, been there, done that it helps. And we know that in our kind of recovery, that when we find out that somebody else has been through what we've been through, there's the times when it's really hard and you go, wait a minute, I'm not alone. I'm not the only one.
Yeah. And there's a reason I feel this way, but I don't have to. I don't have to feel that way. I can change the way I feel about myself. And so what it struck at for me was to look at how we identify ourselves, what it is about us that creates our identity, and also look at how we see other people and what it is about them that we define them by, and recognize that if we define people by the way they treat others or who they hang out with, or that says something about us too. And also we might well look at how we treat people. What's important to us, it should be in us as well. And it's been like this lesson that's lingered in my head, because I know I don't define myself by being a survivor, but I do know that it still affects me. And so that is part of my identity that I can't deny. But to tell you the truth, I'm okay with it right now. The way it affects me isn't really, it's not like a drawback. It's okay. I know I feel vulnerable around men, and I know as soon as I know them, I'm fine, and I don't feel vulnerable. And so it doesn't bug me that much. I get it. The way it used to be is I would never get to know those men because I felt so vulnerable. So, and that's what's changed. I am confident in myself enough to get to know them, to be around, to show them who I am. And before I wasn't, because I felt so vulnerable and so inferior that I wouldn't even show myself to men. And so it would never have gotten to that step of exposing myself to them because I'm confident in who I am.
Wow, that's huge.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, it took a while and it was hard work, but yeah, things change when you pay attention to what's defining you and whether you want it to define you or not.
So when you think about that, and we don't want that to define us, but it is part of us. So when you look at identity, did you have any revelations of who you are? What is your identity? Did anything shift for you this
No,
week?
but I want to do that with my friends.
Yeah.
I'm
challenge
interested
you.
in it, but
I challenge you. And then next week we can check back.
during the week, I looked at what I thought identified, me and what I thought was my identity. So those are two different things. What
Yeah.
I thought identified me and also what I thought my identity was. And I think most of the time I've just spent looking at the differences in those. And yeah, it was a revelation in realizing that there's like two sides to the coin of identity. There's who
Mhm.
you think you are and who you think you're presenting.
Yeah, I think this is really good because a lot of times with my clients, if I say that, who are you? Well, I'm a mom. I'm a wife. Yeah, no, let's get to who are you really? I'm a person who has strong values. I'm a person
Uh-huh.
who stands up for things. I'm a person who, as we start to get more clear when we have better boundaries, we can have a better identity.
Yeah.
Because for me, part of my problem, and I know this isn't true for everyone, but for me, I can be such, and part of it's because I have a mentally ill mother. My mother
Mm-hmm.
has multiple personalities. And so I learned to be a chameleon. I always feel
Mm-hmm.
like I need to write a book for children of multiples because we think about when you're forming your personality and you're watching a parent have different personalities and show up in different
Yeah.
situations. And so I really learned to be a chameleon. And so I have a really passive personality. And like, if you ask me what I want for dinner, I'm going to eat what you eat. I don't have strong feelings about that. And like your wife, Charnel, she's such a foodie. I'm always like, you
Mm-hmm.
pick and I'll eat it. But also, where is that trying to find the balance of? So one of the things is our family's in a lot of crisis right now. And
Yeah.
I just try to be there. I try to show up. And there's an author I love. His name is Bob Goff. Goff, and he wrote a book about love. And he said he wants on his tombstone, I was ridiculously available.
Mm.
And my whole life, my goal was to be available. And then lately I've been feeling like, well, maybe that's kind of pathetic. Oh, she's always so available. But then I'm looking at my family in times of crisis and knowing that I can drop everything and show up. And it doesn't mean I'm going to go and do a bunch of stuff. Most people don't want you to do stuff. They just want you to be with them.
Yeah. Yeah.
But so that is part of my identity, that I love my family and I'm available when they need me. And
Mm-hmm.
that feels kind of weird, but it really has become
Yeah.
how I'm known, how I'm seen. Oh, Lori's always there, which can feel like, oh, everybody's taking advantage of me, but it's really not.
Yeah.
Because that's not when your family's in crisis. There's no taking advantage. You're just showing up. But also there, it feels a little, I don't know, it's pathetic. It's like, I'll be there. So I've struggled with that. Is that a good thing? But when I heard Bob Goff say that, I thought maybe that's a good thing. Maybe I like that identity,
Well,
that you
and
can
that's
count on me.
another part of it is we don't realize that what we find as a quality or what we find as something that's a handicap is different for other people. You're being available and all that. You might think, oh, that's pathetic. That's because I have nothing else to do, et cetera, et cetera. I'm such a loser. Or
Yeah, that's what I was
your
trying to.
family is thinking she's always around. She's
Yeah.
always here to help us when we need it. If there's anyone we can rely on, she's there. And so there's qualities that we're not aware of because we might look at it as a drawback or a failing.
Well,
And
and when you think about codependency, it's people who are, oh, I'll do everything for
always,
you.
yeah.
But the difference is when you try to help people who don't need help, or you do things for people that they can do for themselves, is different than when a family's in crisis and we're
Hmm.
showing up. And
Yeah.
I think that's what I'm recognizing. But yeah,
But
so now I'm redefining that. So
mhm.
something that I thought was pathetic, now I'm like, wait, maybe I like that. Maybe I want that to be my identity.
Yeah. Well, I mean, a big part of our identity is our values. And also, I think what we think we deserve, what we think is our right, the rights that we deserve. You know how you talked about what you used to feel like? I deserved people feeling sorry for me. I deserved people having pity on me. Or that was when you were feeling that or in that victim mode was I have the right to feel sorry for myself. So I have the right to expect people to feel sorry for me. And so that's a value that we may or may not be aware of. Just like, I am with men when they show up, I'm like, oh, I'm less than that because I'm a survivor. So I've got to be hidden or stay away from them. So
Interesting.
it's good to pay attention to what we feel we deserve, I guess is how I would put it. What we feel we deserve and what we should have. I think that help defines us in a way as that's kind of our values, what we care about.
And what, yeah. And I was trying to look for this quote, something about our quirks, like people that maybe like are really loud and everyone's like, oh, you're really loud. But that, maybe that's not necessarily a bad thing. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It's like there's things that people tell us, oh, you worry too much, or that maybe there's something in that that is a good thing versus, oh, I'm just a terrible person because I worry too much, or I'm just too loud, or I'm just
Mm-hmm.
that if we can find a way to turn it around and find the beauty in it. I heard a comedian last night and her whole life, everyone, you're too loud. And she has a beautiful loud voice and everybody could hear her and she was hilarious. And, so is that a bad thing? Is she too
Yeah.
loud?
No, I mean, if you're going into theater, it's a good thing to be heard.
So maybe even I like so much what you said about the difference between who we think we are and who we really are and who people think we are. But also maybe we've assigned some, like me assigning pathetic to available. Maybe we've assigned something negative to something that's actually a good thing.
Yeah, or that others see as our quality.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't really know what other people define us as
Mm-hmm.
if we're just looking at from our point of view, because we might pay attention to something completely different. I know, when the kids were talking about ways they define people, some of them really surprised me because it's not something that would have concerned me about someone. But then I realized they were kind of looking for every answer they could come up with because there was about 8 of them. So they all had to come up with something different. But it also made me think that when I was younger, I defined people in a different way than I do now. And all through my life, that's kind of been changing. And so I think that's also because my values have changed and how I define myself. So I think there's like this mirror effect to what we think about ourselves and what we think about others. And I think if we pay attention to what we think about others and what matters to us about them, it tells us a lot about who we think we are.
And how, if we think well of ourselves, we will think well of others. So, for instance, say, I'll just use myself, say I'm feeling like a failure, and then I see somebody doing what I want to do. They're on the radio. Oh, I always wished I could be on the radio. So then I might assign negative to them because they're doing the thing I want. But if I'm doing what I love, then I'm going to be happy for other people who are doing what they love.
Yeah, you won't be envious or jealous or,
Yeah. So the better we do and the more we, find our identity and get comfortable with it, then the more, like you said, the more we're going to evolve and accept others where they are and be
yeah.
happy for them.
I think, paying attention to the qualities we really care about in others, we should really care about in ourselves. And also think about how our actions define us. What is it that we do that others see in us that defines us in a certain way? And if we're always like me, intimidated at first by men and just kind of hide away from them, how does that define me? It defines me as someone who's, I think they probably just thought I just didn't feel like, I was just not arrogant.
Rude, not friendly.
Yeah, not rude or not friendly, but just not interested. And whereas I really just couldn't deal with it. Literally, I was like, there are these guys at our house and I had to get away from it. So if we don't want to give the impression that we're rude or arrogant, but we are because of our actions, maybe there's a way we can change our actions or do. And as soon as I started talking with them and started dealing with them and connecting with them, of course, we were all friendly. So,
well, I think it's so powerful that you recognize that because that's the circle of healing is that we actually recognize it and we get there sooner each time.
Well, and that's what I've recognized before with men. This has been happening my whole life. And I know I feel that way and I know I get over it as soon as I get to know them, but I still let it stop me sometimes or but now I'm better at it. And now, I actually take the chance to get to know or take that risk. Whereas before I would not have taken it,
Mhm.
or it would have been really hard for me to. Now
Mhm.
it's easier.
That's awesome.
And I think it is because I do recognize my identity as a survivor, but I also recognize that I don't define myself as that's all of my identity. I recognize it as part of my identity, but that's not it. So I don't let it define my whole identity. And that's how it's easier now to, show people the rest of me.
Yeah, which is hard because we want to protect.
Yeah.
We want to protect, and that's not always good. I know, like for me, a lot of times when people ask how I am, I'm fine, I'm fine. And
Hmm.
even with what's going on in our family, people will say, "Well, how are you doing?" I'm like, "Well, I'm the aunt."
Yeah.
This happened to my niece, but it
Yeah.
does. It affects me, and it's okay
Oh,
for me to say it makes me really sad and it's hard, and that's okay. Like I don't have to. Sometimes I think maybe it's our birth order too, but like I know for me, I've like got to be okay.
mhm.
And I don't think anybody expects that. But also, I've worked really hard not to be a whiner and complainer either. I don't want to tell everybody everything. So again, it's that mirror and finding the balance.
Yeah, it's like why when you have justification to really, not necessarily be a whiner, but seriously be upset, but you want to not put that out there. Why
Yeah.
is that something you don't want to represent you as a whiner? Because yeah, I know I'd be a wreck.
Yeah.
But yeah, what matters? Where are our values? Where do they come from?
Mhm.
Is it something that people see in us, our values? And if so, how are we defining
So here's our challenge for this week. You have to do it.
that?
I've already
Oh
done it.
no, no,
You
I
have to do
gotta
it,
do it.
Kevin.
Oh
Ask
no.
5 of your friends to give you 3 words of what
Just
they
three
think,
words?
three to
Oof.
five words of,
Okay. I don't know
not
if I
like a
could.
sentence, but like strong,
Uh-huh.
compassionate, like words like that. Just, yeah, because you'll be blown away. It's really a great activity.
Uh-huh.
Personally, I think, it would be good to do every year because we don't know how, it's so like a lot of times is sometimes if I'm trying to reach out to a friend and they don't reach back, I know that that's a thing. It's just we're busy. But then
Yeah.
sometimes I think, oh my goodness, are they mad at me? And then I start thinking back, did I say something? Did I do? It's so easy to go there.
Oh,
And so it's good to know that
you
people
have no
think
idea, but
things of us.
Charnel always seems to go there. If
Yeah.
she reaches out and someone doesn't contact her, she's like, they're mad at me. I know they're mad. I know there's something
I know.
wrong.
In fact, with all these things going on in my family, everyone I contact, I ask the question or whatever, I go, but hey, don't worry about responding because I know, because we are in basic survival mode,
Yeah.
but I've given them all permission. And so it's, in a way, it's cool because now I don't think anything. If they
Hmm.
don't reach back, I'm like, they
Yeah.
got a lot on their plate.
Yeah. Everyone seems to. I know, we all have varying degrees of stuff going on. And well, that's going to be my challenge for the week. Oh no.
Yep. I can't wait. You can do it.
Okay.
You can do it.
Identity. Where
Yeah.
does it come from?
Yeah. What do
What are
people,
our values and what do people see in us? Do they
yeah.
recognize those values in us?
Yeah. Do you do youth group every week?
No, no, we
Oh,
don't.
so I was
It's
going to say, ask those kids what they see in you.
oh man. That'd be interesting. That'd be interesting.
Yeah.
I might have to.
Mhm.
All righty.
Okay, that's your challenge. And this is the time when we pray. And we're asking you to do it too.
Yeah, I think if you're listening and you want a good challenge, this is a
Yeah.
good challenge.
This is a good
It
challenge.
feels risky, but it's important to know how others define us
Yeah.
because we might even not even be aware of it.
And here's what happened with one of my clients. She did that and she made a list. And what she wrote at the top is I am. And then she listed all the things that people said.
Oh,
And
yeah.
after that happened, she had like 15 or 20 words and she got a cancer diagnosis and she made a poem out of that and she read it morning and night to remember who she was as she was going through all of this cancer treatment.
Wow.
So this can be life-saving.
Wow. Mm.
All right.
So that's it for today.
We are going to have a prayer time if you want to stick with us. If not, we believe in you.
We want to hear from you. We want to hear your stories.
If you like this podcast, please rate and review, because that's how other people can find us. And we really want to spread this message.
Father, I thank you for all your blessings. And I praise you for your definition of us, how you define us, and how that should matter to us more than anything else, that you define us with your grace and mercy and love, and you define us with the fact that you don't give up on us. You care about us and want us to know and feel the same way about ourselves that you feel about us, Lord. I just pray for anyone listening that they would know that no matter how they feel, there's someone out there that cares for them, that really thinks they're important, that they matter to them. And Lord, I just pray your presence in their lives would help them to feel like they matter, that they are loved and cared for. I just pray that they would embrace that and hold that close. In your name I pray.
And Father, thank you that you created each of us individually, that you don't want us to all be the same. And you've given us different gifts, different talents, different quirks. And Father, I pray that as we walk through this week and we ask people to tell us how they see us, that we might be encouraged and uplifted, and it might start to make a shift in who we know we are and how we see ourselves and how we change that self-talk, and that we can say that you are a good, good God, and you created us to do things that help others, that you created us to be loving, and that when we mess up, you're not up there waiting to bonk us over the head, but that you actually love us and forgive us, and that we can always come to you, that you are a good, good Father. And Lord, many of us of survivors, we equate a bad dad maybe, or a difficult father, and that's not you. You're a good Father, and you love us, and you are safe. And thank you that you are a safe God. In your Son's holy name, amen.
Amen.